Hi, this is Joshua Miller, and I am the author of the brand new book, I Call Bullshit, Live Your Life, Not Someone Else's. I'm also a TED Talk speaker and a LinkedIn influencer. And on Dov Baron's leadership show, we're going to talk about assumptions, your blind spots, how to be at your best while cutting through the bullshit. Stay tuned.
Congratulations! You are tuned into Dov Baron's Leadership and Loyalty Show, the #1 podcast for Fortune 500 executives and those who are dedicated to creating a quantum leap in leadership. Your host, Dov Baron, is the founder of FullMontyLeadership.com. He's an executive mentor to leaders like you, a contributing writer for Entrepreneur Magazine, CEO World, and he's been featured on CNN, Fox, CBS, and many other notable sites. Dov Baron is an international business speaker who was named by Inc. magazine as one of the top 100 leadership speakers to hire. Now, over to Dov Baron.
Welcome, dear friends, fans, and fellow aficionados of leadership excellence. I'm your host, Dov Baron. I'm the founder of Full Monty Leadership, and I'm here to assist you tapping into your deep greatness so that you can reach that next level of clarity, focus, purpose, and profit in your business, your life, and your leadership. Thank you for joining us on this episode of Dov Baron's Leadership and Loyalty Tips for Executives, part of the Full Monty interview series, where today we're going to be taking an insider look at the lies that we as leaders tell ourselves and the truths we must face in order to be better leaders and better people for our people and for ourselves. If you're a new listener, new viewer, thank you for joining us. Strap yourself in. We're about to go full Monty. If you're a regular, big thank you to you for making us the #1 podcast globally for Fortune 500 listeners. And we're also extremely grateful to Inc.com for citing us as the #1 podcast to make you a better leader. So thank you for sharing the show with everybody you know. And remember, we always need your help in staying relevant. So please get yourself over to iTunes to rate, review, and subscribe to the show. Remember, you can also find us on Spotify. You can find us on all kinds of usual outlets for downloads, and you can also find us now on terrestrial radio across the United States, and we're also on Roku TV. So tune in and tap in and share the show with everybody you know. All right, let's dive right in and strip it down. As a leader, whether you're a CEO, whether you're a C-suite leader, a sales leader, entrepreneur, leader in any capacity, you know that you've got to stay ahead of the curve as a leader. And that's particularly difficult in an age where we are bombarded with more information in a week than maybe our grandparents might have even faced in a decade. So how do we sift through, find the truth, get the best ideas when we all have blind spots? Well, stay tuned, because our guest today on this episode is Joshua Miller. Joshua Miller is a certified master personal executive coach who has spent his life supporting people to bury their bullshit and uncover the greatness that they already have. He started his career as a creative director in advertising, responsible for the campaign strategies for Fortune 100 brands, and now creates and supports executive leadership development for many of the same companies. He's a TED Talk speaker, LinkedIn top influencer, a contributing writer for major industries-related journals, including Thrive Global and Medium, and is the creator of My Instant Coach, the first life coaching app for iPhones. He's now married with 2 kids, living in California. He's escaped from Manhattan, and he's presently looking for, that was a movie, yes. He's presently looking for the best slice of pizza on the West Coast. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together and welcome Josh Miller! And the crowd goes wild, young man.
Thank you. I love it. Thank you so much. Thank you for having me here. It's
so great
it's a
to have you, mate. Now,
yeah.
what our listeners and viewers don't know is you and I have become friends over the last year or so, and we have these great conversations. And one of the reasons that we have great conversations is because neither of us particularly likes bullshit. One of us has even been so daring as to write a book about it. Tell us the title of your new book, which is going to be out in about 4 minutes. And why you called it that.
Yeah, so thank you. The title of the book is I Call Bullshit, Live Your Life, Not Someone Else's. And why I chose that title was purely because when I look at the 20 years of working with leaders and individuals across the country, and I've read the books and I subscribe to the models, I've walked on the coals, I've been to the seminars, what I found is that a lot of these books are great in content. They're great in aha, insight, but sometimes they lack on the substance of application. What do you actually do with what you just learned?
Right.
And for me, when I was toying around with the idea of writing a book, some people approached me a couple of years ago and they said, you should write a book on leadership development or executive coaching. And I said, it doesn't resonate with me. There's enough books out there to do that. And as I've been thinking about writing a book for close to 3 years, it hit me one day where I realized what's missing and what I would like to read personally is a book that just cuts through the bullshit.
Right.
That takes the essence of all of the great work that people in our industry have done, but just decomplexifies, distills it down to what's the bare essence? What is it telling you? What is it teaching you? And then how do you go apply it? Because an insight without application is really just an insight. It's nothing else. So I call bullshit has kind of a double meaning. One is I call bullshit not so much on people or the industry, but it's really on the conversations we're having. And it's time that we stop living lies and really start asking ourselves some pertinent questions. We got to get more curious about who we are, what we're doing, stop complaining, stop being a victim, and start getting curious around what can we do about it. And that's what this book is really drives home.
But it's one thing to get curious,
sure.
But I think that in the context of what you're talking about, there's also the need for courage.
Absolutely.
And I think for me, at least, I believe that true curiosity goes hand in hand with courage. And it's easy to be curious and do bugger all with it. But to be curious and courageous requires vulnerability. It requires openness. There's a lot of that. And that's a lot of what you do in the work you're doing with your leaders that you work with, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a good point. So yes, curiosity may be the entryway, but stepping outside of your comfort zone and being vulnerable, right? Being humble for leaders, especially executives at the top level. They've got so many filters and lenses and protection and armor. A lot of them just do being executive. They're not actually being an executive. Right. And so yes, curiosity comes with the courage, the heart, the vulnerability, the humanity, that humility lens so that they can step outside and be curious, and again, to that point, look for what's the action I can take, right? The insight is great, but the action is needed. So, when we're working with leaders, and you and I work with leaders all the time, you always get the it's almost like the boilerplate answer. Now, here's what it's like they think they're on camera. It's like, no, you're not on camera. Don't tell me what you think I want to hear. Tell me what's resonating quietly in your head and in your heart when you go to sleep at night. That's the conversations we need to be having. Not the ones that are on the public forum.
Yeah, I love the disclaimer in the book. The good news is you just took the first step toward taking back your life by buying this book. Yeah. The bad news is you're full of shit.
Yeah, well,
I love that. For me, I love that. But why I want to bring it up is because there's you and I have talked about there's a lot of crossover in the work that we do.
Sure.
And you just mentioned it. Leaders are busy being the image of leaders, right. And with that comes a lot of bravado. And that threatening that bravado by saying the bad news is you're full of shit, that puts a lot of, the majority of them way off, and they're like, I am not going there. Yeah. So talk to us about bumping into that ego, which is inevitable.
Yeah. So, I think as I'm approaching my 20th year of coaching, my edge around how to attack what we're talking about has become a lot clearer for me. So what that looks like is if a leader wants to engage with me and hiring me as a coach, or I'm working with them, I'm very clear on setting the foundation and the expectations and the precedent for, hey, if we're going to go there and you want to work together, this is where we're going to go. And I may not be the right coach for you. Right. And I'm very clear about that. I want to be responsible about it, because the ones that are really willing to do the work and get out of their head and into their heart, that's where this work really starts to transform people, and they stop doing leadership and they start being a leader, right? We're all smart up here. It's the wiring that gets crossed down in the heart. So I'm very clear, if somebody wants to go there, and as a coach and working with companies and leaders, as you know, we do assessments, right? We talk to people before we take them on to make sure, are they willing to go there? Are they ready to go there? A lot of people talk about transformation and mindfulness as something, this is great, let's do it, it's the next thing. I'll go on to Groupon and get a 7-day mindfulness class, right? It's become almost a joke or a fad. And it's unfortunate because there's a lot of great work being done in this area, and there's a lot of great work that can be done on oneself when applied correctly. So to your point, I look at it as if you want to really make a shift, I mean, you really want to make a shift, it's going to require you to do something you've never done before. Mm-hmm. And are you open and ready to do that? And that's basically asking people to take a leap of faith, right?
Yeah. And again, the interesting thing about becoming highly successful, becoming a leader in any capacity, you did that because you were able to achieve that because you took massive risks. But the interesting thing is, it's very interesting because there's an elite class of people who continue in that. But most people will take enough risks to get to the top. But once they're at the top, they become risk averse. Yeah, it's very interesting because I've seen you and I have both worked with these people. They're phenomenal at taking the risk. They do a great job of doing what it takes to get to the top. But then once they're there, it's like, oh no, hold on a second. Let's just back this up a little bit because I am already there, and you're telling me to do something that could actually take me off. Yeah. Right. So again, we're back to that piece around. I got to look at something that could rattle my image of myself, that could rattle other people's image of myself.
Sure. Well, you bring up a really good point. One thing I do with leaders who I find, or clients of mine who I find are risk averse, I give them the practice area of every day, do one thing that's going to force you outside of your comfort zone. Mm-hmm. Or said another way, just do one thing that's different. Right. This happened last week. I had a leader I was working with, and she said to me, she goes, well, I don't know what that means. What does that mean? Right. So I said, are you a lefty or a righty? She goes, I'm a righty. I said, great. So do everything lefty for one day. See what happens. What do you have to lose? Right? It's something small. This doesn't require money. This doesn't require taking a course. Yeah. This is just about shifting habits. And we can all do it. We can absolutely all do it.
Yeah. I think that we don't know, we're not aware because we're inside. I mean, one of the things there's that great poem about the two young fish swimming in the water, mm-hmm. and passing the old fish, and the old fish looks at them and nods and says, how's the water today, lads? the young fish swim on and stop for a second and look at each other and go, what the freak is water? Right? And I think that a lot of the time we're operating that way. We don't realize we're swimming in our own crap. We're swimming in our own ideas. We're swimming in our own bias. We're swimming in that all the time, and we're not aware of it. And having a coach like you or me or working with people like us is a way for any of us to see what we can't see. Now, and I'll bring this and I'll make it really personal so everybody can see that, I believe that you shouldn't sell what you're not willing to buy. So as an example, I have an advisory board. Josh, this guest right now, is on that advisory board. There are 7 people who are on that advisory board, and when I'm feeling stuck or I feel like I need a breakthrough or I need to shift something, I'm going to call those people together, and I have, and we get together and we're going to examine things that are probably not going to be comfortable for me to do. But I'm swimming in my own bias. Yeah. And it's really easy for me to go, wow, aren't I fabulous, or aren't I crap? And I think that this is one of the things about the mind, you've heard me talk about this many times before, listener, viewer, is that the mind works in polarity. You're the best things in sliced bread, you're a bag of crap, and you'll never be anything. and if you have an advisory board, if you have a great coach, if you have people who can see what you're swimming in, they can guide you. And this is the value of hiring somebody like Josh, why the top executives hire somebody like Josh, is because you and I have this laser ability to see what other people are not willing to see.
Well, that's very kind of you. And yes, it's true. But not all coaches are created equal.
That's a very good point.
And not all leaders are either. And that's why the work that we do requires us to really assess organizations and leaders and individuals before we engage with them, similar to what we were talking about before, to ensure that they're ready to go there, or at least have the ability to show up if we go to that place, number one. Number two, a lot of people hire coaches because it's a check on the box of things to do from a development standpoint, especially in larger organizations. Yeah. And then as a result, a lot of coaches, and I'll be bold in saying this, take their foot off the gas. They're more, I'll say that they're okay with collecting the money, and they will reserve themselves as to how far or when to engage or push a leader on something. Now, I know that could be seen as a very testy comment that I made, but I think it's important to understand that, every coach is different. Every person's different. Every engagement's different. And Dov and I, we have a very similar methodology in terms of cutting right to the core. Yeah. What's the root cause? And then let's address it. Some people need to dance around at 30,000 feet to get warmed up and then drop down to a lower altitude. So I think it's really just about engaging the coach and the individual and understanding, are they willing to go from their head to their heart, and how soon, how fast, right?
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. It's certainly been my own challenge is that I think that not only does the quote coach need to have courage, but so does the person we're coaching. And I think that sometimes as coaches we think that we don't have to have the courage, but we have to have the courage to push through. Particularly when you're dealing with a high-profile individual, because it's like, wow, that's really good on my resume that I'm working with Charlie, who is the CEO of XYZ company. But Charlie needs to be pushed. You and I have had some similar conversations, but I was working with a lady years ago, and she said something to me, and I just leaned in, and I let her finish. I leaned in, and I said, "You do know you're full of shit, right?" and she was quite shocked.
Yeah.
And she said, nobody speaks to me like that. And I said, maybe that's the problem.
Exactly.
And she said, what do you mean? I said, well, everybody's blowing smoke up your skirt. How are you supposed to get to the truth? Yeah. And she starts to crack a smile, and she said, you really don't care about my money, do you? Or about my title. And I said, I don't care about it. I respect it because I know what it took to get there, but I don't care about it. What I care about is you, your heart, your soul, and who you really are. And so often, I know even for myself, so often it would be easy not to go there and think, oh, I should just back off a little bit.
Yeah.
But this is the thing about being a coach is that the integrity of your work, the integrity of who you are in that work is rare. Wouldn't you agree that so often that 100%. Just doesn't happen?
Yeah, 100%. I think that you have to be willing to go there, right? You have to. Mm-hmm. And I want to go back on something you said before about the mastermind group or advisory board. A lot of people, and I make a point to preface this, I don't stand on a soapbox, although I always joke around that I'd be a lot taller and I wouldn't mind it, but I don't stand on a soapbox.
Well, I'll be standing next to you so we can both have some height.
Yeah, we both have soapboxes. I've been working with a coach for 19 and a half years. I've had two different coaches in my life. The first one was about 6 years and the rest with a different individual. So what I tell all my clients, I don't care who they are, where they work, how much money they have, what they look like. The only difference between me and you is that I've been working on myself longer. I've created more self-awareness. I've looked under the bed. I've looked under the carpet. I've looked in the closet. Like I've looked everywhere I need to, and I continue to do it every day. Mm-hmm. Every day I am challenged. So I know that for me to show up and be the best version of myself for my clients requires me to do the work as well.
Yeah.
And I think we inherently as human beings take the safe and lazy road or route. And I've said before that the path right forward is going to require work. It's going to require that courage. It's going to require that curiosity. Otherwise, you're settling for mediocrity, and that's bullshit to me personally.
Right.
And if that's how you want to live your life, that's totally fine. There's nothing wrong with that. If you're happy, great.
Yeah.
Right? That's fine. It just comes down to what's going to make you happy, and how are you going to get there? Because you can talk about it, or you can take action on it. It's just entirely up to you.
Yeah, I fully agree. Now, you recently had a TED Talk come out, and one of the things you talked a lot about in that TED Talk was assumptions.
Yeah.
Talk to us a little bit about assumptions, because, I want to bring this back to this framework of looking at the need for curiosity, the need for courage. Walk us through it a little bit, Josh, because I thought you brought some powerful points in that speech.
No, I appreciate it. When I was thinking about what can I write, What can I express in my TED Talk? Again, similar. I didn't want to regurgitate something that had been said before 1,000 times. And blind spots is not a new topic. No, emotional blind spots, I think, is not something that's readily talked about. And when I started thinking about that and looking at that as a topic to research, what I quickly noticed is that the pathway to assumptions, a pathway to blind spots is the assumptions that we make.
Right.
And we make a lot of them. I mean, our brain is doing it all the time, even when we're not even aware of that.
Yeah.
So as a result, what happens is we're on autopilot,
yeah.
right? And our brain can't function on autopilot. We think we can. It's like the multitasking thing, but we can't. But our brain has to make assumptions because it's operating at such a high level. It's computing so many different things in processes in front of us that it's got to go on autopilot to ensure that we can do the things that are most important. So basically, it's prioritizing in the background.
Sure.
So assumptions are a part of everyday life. The challenge is when you start making assumptions about human beings and about relationships and loved ones, let alone yourself, that's when you start to get into trouble. And that's where these blind spots become true caverns, right? They become wells, if you will, where they just go straight down. And people tend to just jump into that assumption and go ride straight to the bottom. And they don't spend time thinking, well, wait, why am I doing this? How did I get here? What is this going to cost me? Assumptions, I believe, are the #1 killer of relationships to self and to others. And the way in which we can begin to get a hold on our assumptions is to create some self-awareness, is to actually pause and stop and reflect. And this is where some mindful breathing comes in, some being present, intentionality, and start to ask yourself those questions that we talked about before, that having the courage to say, well, is this serve me? What am I going to get out of this? Is this what I want, right? These are the types of questions that we don't engage in enough. And as a result, our assumptions go on autopilot. And then we wind up in a situation or a relationship or a job. And then we wake up one day and wonder, how the fuck did I get here?
Right.
This is not what I want.
Right.
This is not what I settled for. And that's when we have to stop and say, okay, well, let's look at how you got here, because we are doomed to repeat things over and over again as human beings if we do not stop to learn the lesson.
Yeah. And again, that's coming back to what we talked about just a few minutes ago, is do you have the courage to stop? Because again, you are working with leaders, you're working with people at the top of their game, and it's the ego. We all have human beings. We all have an ego, and to say, for me to stop when I'm already, quote, the winner, and to stop and say something's off takes so much courage. Not just courage in the world, because it's certainly that, but courage with one's own ego. One of the books I wrote years ago, which actually I just had it on my desk this morning, was called "Don't Read This, Your Ego Won't Like It." Another title for your book, really, and it's exactly that. It's this, you've got to battle your own ego, because my ego wants to say, listen, everybody thinks you're the best thing since sliced bread, so shut up and just cruise along. But you have to self-check, and that piece that you're talking about taking some mindful moments and breathing, not as some new trendy shit to do, but actually to just get present with yourself and go, am I truly happy? And the truth of the matter is, I just want to be clear with everybody, nobody's going to, if you're saying yes every single time, you're a freaking liar.
That's bullshit.
And if you're saying no all the time, you're a freaking liar. You're in a mindset. As opposed to understanding there are moments where you're going to feel deliciously happy. There are moments where you're going to feel like crap. But overall, when you look, you go, is this, and this is what you were saying, am I actually where I want to be, in a place of joy and happiness and for me, service? Am I really providing what it is that I came to the world to do? And I think that that's a huge question that leaders need to ask.
I agree. I mean, I always ask my clients and people in general, are you happy or are you just comfortable? Right? There's a fine line there. A lot of people are just comfortable. And I challenge that and say, well, are you comfortable or are you settling?
Right.
Well, what's the difference? Well, you tell me what the difference is, because if you don't see a difference, then maybe that's a question or a place to look.
Right.
At the end of the day, happiness is contingent on different things for different people, right?
Of course.
What makes you happy is different than what's going to make me happy. But you can be happy and successful, right? People what I notice is that people put everything in opposition.
Mm-hmm.
I can either do this or do that. I can have this or be that.
Right.
I don't know how to have two things at once.
Right.
It's too much for me. And then something you said before, which I thought was really spot on, is that, a lot of these leaders, and we're talking about celebrities, athletes, actors, all walks of life, they surround themselves by yes people, right? Oh, yeah, what should I do? Sure. Rarely do they surround themselves by people that will challenge them. Now, that's not all people, but majority of people.
Sure.
Because the question is, maybe I should do this. Well, why would you do that? Why risk blank? And I think that's a valid question. Why risk something? But it's only valid if you answer and engage in that conversation. Many of the times people say, well, why risk it? Oh, yeah, you're right. I shouldn't risk it.
Right.
But you haven't talked about what is actually at risk.
Mm-hmm.
And this is where people don't peel back the layers. We stop right when we're about to have a breakthrough or engage in a conversation, bringing it back to being courageous, being curious. And I think it's such a missing. It's such a missing.
Yeah, that is a great point. What are you actually? I think it's the word actually. What are you actually risking? Not what do you perceive you're risking, but what are you actually risking?
Yeah.
We live in a world that is. I refer to it as we live in a bubble-induced world. We talk about the Republicans living in the Fox bubble. We talk about liberals living in the NBC bubble. But the truth is we all live in bubbles. We surround ourselves with people. Our Facebook feed, the algorithm is doing that to us constantly.
Absolutely.
We're living in a bubble where people agree with us. And, one of the great things is, part of the advisory board is, I know people are going to challenge me in that. I know I've surrounded myself with people who are not always from my world, who are from other worlds, who are going to see things differently. And when I look at great leaders, the ones who are really exceptional leaders, they have surrounded themselves with people who don't agree with them. Even Abraham Lincoln purposely chose a cabinet of people who were directly opposed to him. Right. And the sycophantic response of, yes, you're right, is so easy to get in. And I talked about this in my last book, and I talked about it in an article I wrote, and I did a video on it, which is leaders often surround themselves with people who turn them into psychics. And we were working with a team, and we're having this, the founder wasn't there, the rest of the team were there. We were talking about what they'd gotten out of the work we'd been doing, and they were saying it was great, blah, blah, blah. And then the founder came in, and the founder was in a pissy mood, which is not unusual for him, because he was being challenged and he doesn't like that. And at one point he stops and he goes, "This is a complete waste of time." And they all think it's a waste of time. So he's doing his psychic thing, right? They all think. And I said, really? That's interesting. We had a conversation before you arrived, and that wasn't my impression at all. Yeah. And he said, well, I'll show you. And he asked each member, and they all backpedal and agree with him. Why? Because he has the power of the checkbook. Yeah. And so this is the same with you're a celebrity with an entourage. Well, you know, what are they going to say? No, you're a dick? No, nobody's going to say that because, you know, I'm living in my apartment and you're paying the rent. No, you're fantastic and you always make great decisions. Of course. This is the danger for all of us in any position of power or leadership. Yep. Is how do you talk to us a little bit here, Josh, about how do we get those people that are surrounding us that are, I think intuitively you know they're not really going to challenge you. How do we get them to challenge us? Or how do we get past that sycophantic response? So what I've seen in organizations and clients I work with, there's two ways I'm going to answer this. The first is the very direct and non-bullshit way, which is you can't. Sometimes you simply cannot. Right. And I know because I have spent endless nights up trying to crack the code on an organization or an executive leadership team or a specific CEO or somebody that's in a power position, or I would add the word influence, right? Because really what we're talking about is these people have a lot of influence. Mm-hmm. And I would argue that they're pissing it away by surrounding themselves with people that are really looking out for their own intentions, not necessarily their intentions. Because if that person is dependent on that leader, like you said, they're not going to do anything to ruin their paycheck or their status or whatever that lifeline may be. But to answer your question, the second piece is you got to be willing to challenge it. It starts with
surrounding yourself with people. So if, for example, if I'm going into a situation like that, I'm going to do my homework. I'm going to prepare. And one of the things that I do that I don't actually ever talk about in public is two things. One, I have an advisory board myself, and it's made up of two colleagues, a mentor of mine, my wife, and my brother. And because these are people that, although they love me unconditionally, they want me to succeed, but they won't do it at the risk of me failing, meaning they're going to challenge me so that I can rise and be at my best. And each of those people add a different lens and a different quality. Right. So what I do is if I'm going into a situation where I know I'm going to need, I'm going to have to dig deep, I role play with my advisory board. I actually assign roles to different people based on the situation, and we go at it, and we'll role play for hours so that I can actually test how I could move in a situation, right? The other thing that I think is really important, going back to something we talked about before, I always ask leaders if, what they do in their spare time. How do they challenge? And I don't mean necessarily the weekend warrior type of stuff. You can tell a lot about somebody based on what they do in their spare time. You can also tell more about somebody in how long it takes them to answer that question. Because people that truly have a passion or purpose outside of what they do day to day, they'll tell you very quickly, oh, I love to paint. I love to ride bikes. I love to travel, right? And then there are the people that think about it. And there's a fine line between thinking about it like, oh, no one's ever asked me, and what's the answer they want to hear? And the reason I bring this up is because for what we do, we cannot be so focused on that blade of grass that we don't see the whole forest. Right. It's important that not only do we have coaches and advisory boards, but we also have outside extracurricular activities. It's important that we're challenging ourselves on a daily basis. Once a quarter, I choose something. I do something. I got this from there's the 4-hour work week, and then there's Morgan Spurlock with about the 30 days. And that's where I kind of got the idea of what could I just create a challenge to not necessarily create a new mindset, but just some sort of breakthrough. So every 30 to 45 days, I take on something that's going to challenge me. And so, I think it's also important that we challenge ourselves in order that we know we've experienced what we're asking other people to do. And so when it comes to going up against a leader and a team where you have a bunch of, as you said, the word sycophants or people that are yesing them, the only way you're going to crack that code is if you cut through the bullshit. Yeah. You've got to call people out on what they're doing. And it gets uncomfortable. It gets uncomfortable.
But again, Josh, this is one of the things. The work that we do is about helping people through that discomfort.
Absolutely.
But as you said, most people are comfortable, and comfortable is complacency. As the old saying goes, people will say they're in a groove, but a groove is just a shallow rut, and a rut is a shallow grave. Yeah. So and being pushed into that place is, again, it's what, for me, it's what real leadership is, whether it's at a personal level, whether it's a corporate level, or whether it's at any level. It's that understanding of willing to be courageous, to face that I'm not where I know I could be. And that is often hard for a leader who is somebody who is admired or recognized or whatever it is. Yeah. I want to come to a piece that I found very interesting that I think will help bring this home. When we talk about blind spots and assumptions and all those kinds of things, there was a great piece in your TED Talk that I thought was a really great way for people to grasp this. And I know that a lot of powerful people listen and watch this show. And so we're going to say, okay, so you, as the listener, as the viewer, get to pick who is going to be the best negotiator for the United States in a conversation with Kim Jong-un. Who are you going to pick? Are you going to pick a diplomat? Are you going to pick Hillary Clinton, who did those kinds of roles? Are you going to pick somebody that Donald Trump has assigned? And you came up with somebody who was a much better choice because, and who automatically would fall into the blind spots of most of us who would think about politics and diplomacy. Talk to us a little bit about that, because I thought it was a great example of, here's somebody who has knowledge, but we would never go there.
Well, first of all, thank you. I think It's interesting. Timing is everything. And who knew that, unfortunately, we would be in a situation where what I was talking about would be relevant.
Yes, that's a very good point. I'm sure when you did it, you did not know where this was going.
No, I didn't. I think I'm trying to figure out how to answer your question. Can you reframe it in another way?
Yeah, I mean, the simplicity of it is that we automatically think this person is the best person for the job. Sure. And as a result, I mean, this is why I want leaders to watch this or listen to this, is we think this is the best person for the job, and that blind spot gets in the way for us to see that actually, no, that's not the best person for the job. There's somebody over here who's far better for the job, who doesn't look the part, who maybe has tattoos or earrings or something, who's a much better person.
Well, I think if you look at history, some of the most successful people in all walks of life, politics and not, we're the underdog, right? We're the person on the sideline. We're the person that wasn't picked number one. I think we're so quick to choose the shiny object, whether, and metaphorically speaking, if that's the person, right? And unfortunately, again, that person tends to make a lot of assumptions.
Right.
So we're basing our opinion off someone's assumptions. So an opinion on an assumption. And when you're dealing with something like nuclear arms, that's a scary assumption to be making. Yeah. I think taking a pause and before making a quick judgment of he's the best or she's the best, let's go with that person. Take a moment to step back. Take a moment to get some distance, some perspective. The world, in theory, will not end if we do that and see what are your options. Because that's really what I'm hearing from you. And that's also what I was getting to, is that we have choices. You have a choice. I have a choice. Are you going to exercise that choice?
Right.
That's entirely up to you. I tell people all the time, you can say yes, you can say no, or you can do nothing. But doing nothing is still a choice. And a lot of people seem to forget that. So when you are at an inflection point, or you're at a crossroads, or you're confronted with something, remember, you have options. You can address it. You can get into it. You could take a break. Don't walk away forever, right? Or you can just say, I'm done. I don't want to have anything else to do with this. But I tell people, that path of least resistance, right, is the path to least existence. You will have a life that is mediocre, which brings us back to what we were talking about before.
Yeah. The path of, my quote is, the path of least resistance is filled with the corpses of possibility.
Whoa, I like that.
Right. That's one of my quotes. But the reference I want to specifically make, because I think it's just such a great example that I want our listeners to get, is, if we're all aware, as we record this, we're all aware of the situation with North Korea and what's going on there, the nuclear arms, and firing missiles and all kinds of stuff. And Donald Trump, who is presently the president as we record, could send Rex Tillerson there because that's Rex Tillerson's job. But a better choice might be Dennis Rodman, as you pointed out in your TED Talk. And the simple reason is because there's rapport there. Because, so who actually knows more about Kim Jong-un, Rex Tillerson, or Dennis Rodman, the wild guy, the crazy guy with the earrings and the tattoos that we might look at and dismiss because of our own blind spots, because of our own assumptions, because of our own bias, may actually be the best person for the job. Yeah.
No, listen, all joking aside, he could very well be our best option.
Absolutely.
Right? And because he has the relatedness, because there's a mutual understanding. I'm not going to begin to talk politics because I don't know what I don't know. But in my TED Talk, and what you're pointing to is that sometimes, the best option is not the one that's right in front of us. Yeah. It may be behind that or in our blind spot, right? Yeah. And it just requires us to step back. Just to go back about blind spots for a moment, writing my book, it took me close to 7 months to write this book. And the whole process, to me, was one blind spot after another. Mm-hmm. What I thought I was writing about was actually not about that topic. It was about something painful or something I had to unearth about an insecurity or an inauthenticity about myself or an incompletion with another loved one or something. And blind spots are everywhere. It's part of who we are. Cool, and I ask people to just embrace that. Don't look at it as like, oh, God, I'm going to push my blind spots away, because we all do that. But what's the alternative? You'll be like a racehorse with those blinders on the whole time.
Right.
And your view of life will be very myopic, and you will lose out on a lot of opportunities and a lot of possibility. And I encourage people to just slowly start to expand their horizons. There's so much out there. And just yesterday I was talking to someone, a stranger I met at a Starbucks. She was 87 years old, and she goes to this Starbucks every single day. And I had seen her 2 days in a row, and I was just like, I saw you yesterday. And I was talking to her, and the short version of it is she said, this is part of my routine. And I said, what, coming to Starbucks? She goes, no, I order something differently every day. And I said, oh, okay, that seems good. She's like, I'm not finished. And I was like, oh, I'm sorry. And she goes, and I talk to a different person every day. And I was like, wow. I was like, how long have you been doing that? Because I'm thinking in my head, how long has Starbucks been around? 20 plus years, right? Doing the math. And she goes, I've been doing it since Starbucks opened, but I've been doing it my whole life. Mm-hmm. And I was like, so it's just not about coffee? She goes, it's never been about coffee. It's been about trying something new. It's about meeting new people. I was like, wow, that's just incredibly inspiring. Mm-hmm. Right? That this is someone who's been doing this her whole life. She's 87, whatever. I was like, and I bought her the coffee because I was like, this is just it's beautiful. I mean, it's beautiful. I hope that when I'm 87, I'm still operating from that same mindset. I think that would be a blessing.
Yeah, but it's so easy not to do that. It's so easy to surround yourself with those who will tug their forelock and say you're right, and rather than challenging you. People say to me, how are you friends with this person? This person is, they're so right-wing or they're so left-wing or whatever it is. I'm like, because my friends don't have to agree with me. Yeah. I want them to challenge me. I want to look at, okay, I think this is right, but hold on a sec. I'll give you an example, because I know you wrote a piece on LinkedIn that got a little bit of about it. But I was always very anti-guns, totally anti-guns. And then I was working with a client many years ago, probably 15 years ago, and I got to meet him. He was down in Arizona, and he said, we were having this conversation, and he was an ex-Marine, and he said, come out here, and he's got this thing that he pulls behind his car that is like a a small semi-trailer, for moving. He opens it up, and it's all freaking weapons.
Jesus.
And I'm like, holy, this is, I don't know what you're hunting, but it's potentially an army that you're hunting. It certainly isn't anything you could eat. Yeah. And he's like, and so I said, let me just be clear. I don't get this.
Yeah.
I'm not an American. I wasn't born here.
No.
So I don't get it. I do understand it now much better. And we sat down and we had a conversation. And for the first time, I got why he had weapons. I got why that mindset is embedded in the American culture. And it's one of the things I've talked about is when it comes to guns, I think we need a better solution. But we've got to get to, you're not going to get Americans to give up guns because it's an identity piece. You're asking people to cut off their hand. It's not going to happen. So it has to be managed better, and that's up for debate how we do that. And I'm not getting into that here. But it's this understanding that being willing to have a conversation with somebody you fervently disagree with, who you can learn from. As you know, my buddy Tony and I went and we spoke at the UN. He was a neo-Nazi who I helped to de-radicalize, and we're talking about de-radicalizing extreme leadership.
Wow.
And they were asked, well, how did you start this conversation with Tony? And I said, ask Tony. I said, did we talk about de-radicalization? He goes, no. And they said, well, what did you talk about? He said, Monty Python. Nice. That's what we talked about. Because you have to find a place of rapport to come together. And I think that we come at things like this. And so when a coach like you confronts a leader, they want to go like this, as opposed to saying, hold on a second, what if this person's on my side but is looking from another angle?
Totally. Well, I love what you just said, because my job, our job, right? And you said this earlier, we're not there to just challenge people for the sake of challenging somebody.
Absolutely.
Our job is to unearth what their mindset is, what is behind what they're saying. Right? It's not what they're saying. It's not the content. It's the context.
Absolutely.
Because at the end of the day, if there wasn't something there, then why would they hire us? Why are we sitting across from them? Why are we talking to them on the phone? They know there's something, and they may know what it is, or they may not. And our job is to help them get to it.
Right.
There's a commercial that you reminded me of some of the best commercials around inclusion and diversity, unfortunately, don't always come out of the U.S. There was one Heineken commercial.
Fantastic commercial. I use it in one of my presentations.
Yes. I mean, it's just incredible. It's so moving, right? It's so powerful. And I just think we need more of that. Absolutely. We really just need more of that. You know, I've been searching for a platform my whole life. You know, when I did the My Instinct Coach back, it was like 10 years ago now, to me, that was radical. That was disruptive.
Right.
No one had done it. And I said, all right, well, how can I take basically the essence of those dummies books, right? Like Coaching for Dummies. How could I distill down what coaching is and put it on an iPhone so that at least 1 million plus people could have access to the same type of work that we do, but can't afford it.
Right.
And at that time, I was like, okay, this is a way to bring people together.
Fabulous.
Right? Recognize that we all have this, we're all dealing with the same shit. I speak about this more than anything, that I don't care if you're an athlete, an actor, a CEO, a retiree, work for the Navy, it doesn't matter. We're human beings.
Yeah.
All the challenges, the conversations, the ego, the insecurities, they fall into 4 areas: our career, our finances, our relationship to self and others, and our wellness, right? Our mind, body, and spirit.
Right.
And if you just drill everything down, it's always going to fall into one of those 4 categories. And, you know, one of the things that I've noticed just in life in general, and I've noticed through talking to you, of course, as well, in the conversations that we have about deep greatness and how do you tap into that heart and that soul and that spirit, is you got to have the courage. You got to have the curiosity. You know, you got to be willing to do the work. And that's something that I talk about a lot, is you got to be willing to do the work. If you're not willing to do the work, then don't raise your hand yet, right? Don't raise your hand. And if you raise your hand and then you realize, I'm not ready for this yet, okay, then say, I'm going to take a break.
Right.
Right?
Have the courage to be honest about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And again, I just want to preface, Bob, that, you know, it's easy for people to listen to this or see this and say, oh, well, he's just, you know, he's, again, speaking from a platform. No. I have cried. I have gotten angry. I've gotten frustrated. I've had to make amends with myself and with others. I've had to do a lot of work on myself to be able to get to where I am today, to be able to speak about what I'm most passionate about. So,
and again, this is again coming back to what you said about assumptions.
Yeah.
You know, there's a lot of assumptions about who we are and what we do.
Of course.
And you know, I have never, first of all, I've never met a leader, a real leader, in the category of way we would put it, who isn't willing to be politically incorrect. I haven't met a real leader who isn't willing to risk it all, including their own status. And I haven't met a real leader who isn't deeply, deeply engaged in self-knowledge. And if you are a leader watching, listening to this, and you go, well, I've never done any therapy, I've never done any work on myself, I'm sorry, I'm going to call bullshit. Then you're not really a leader. Yeah. That's what it takes. You know, there's all this thing. I mean, I love Goleman's work around emotional intelligence, but so many people take it on as something I use on people. No, it's something you must use on yourself first. And if you're not really a leader unless you have balls, and balls means self-examination, because then you're coming at people not with an attack, but you're coming at them with compassion. When I was asked years ago, I was asked in an interview years ago, what makes you so damn good at what you do? And the answer was, it's easy. I can answer that easily. And they said, what's that? I said, nobody sits in front of me who isn't me. Yeah. And they go, what do you mean? I go, everybody who I've ever worked with, I can see a reflection of myself. It might not be who I am now. It might be who I was 10 years ago. And it might be hints of what I'm still dealing with myself. And that humanity, that compassion is what makes us better. Yeah. And I see that in you.
Yeah. Wow. You just said so much good stuff there. Give me a moment, right? You know, there are few people, leaders, that I've met, I mean, probably on my hand, that I could say are truly, and I'm going to use a word I know that tends to trigger you a bit, that are authentic, right? That are like, they're not doing the role. They're actually being a leader.
They're actually genuinely authentic.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things that is a real trigger for me, and I'm guilty of doing this, is writing these articles, 10 best, 5 best, 6 things. I even say it in my book. I said, you know, if there was really only 10 things that successful people truly do every day, then we would all be doing it. It's just, you take it out of context. But when I look at some leaders that I've seen, I've studied, I've watched, there's one in particular that I can say has embodied qualities that I respect, which is Jeff Weiner from LinkedIn, CEO of LinkedIn. Yeah. Here's a man who has, at different points in his career, has had to step up and be humble and own certain things. And I've seen the way he's done it. And he's either incredibly polished, which I think he is to an extent because he understands his role, or he's just being genuine. And there's a certain thing you just can't fake. There's certain CEOs or certain leaders that will come up and you can just tell they've rehearsed this over and over and over again. And then there are ones that come out and say, look, I'm here. One of the things that I've noticed working and living in the Silicon Valley Bay Area, a lot of companies are big on these town hall meetings. Fridays, Thursdays, everyone gets together, ask any questions. And I've sat through a lot of them. And what I've noticed is that the cultures that get it right, you will have questions that you'll be like, whoa, wait, what? They're asking that, right? And then you have questions that are just, softball, just lob them in. They're balloons all day. Yeah. And I always wonder, like, why bother doing this? This is just, again, that check mark, right? Exactly. Like, oh, we did it. It's good. Everyone's happy. But there's so much more we could be doing. There's so much more. It starts with ourselves.
When you are out and about and somebody says to you, what do you do?
I don't answer it.
You don't?
No, I don't tell people what I do. Because, growing up in New York City, of all places, which is all about status and ego, first of all, that's all anyone ever says. People don't say, how are you doing? And that's partially because it's New York. Nobody cares how you're doing. They care about you getting out of their way. People always say when you meet somebody, hey, what do you do? That's what I've known for 40 plus years. And so part of it is as I've moved to California and I've gotten away from my East Coast a little bit, my reaction when someone says, what do you do, is partially just to not answer that. So that's kind of a fight or flight thing. But the reason I typically don't talk about what I do is because the experiences I had in the past is people start to look at me differently. They start to, it's almost like if I said, you asked me what I do, and I said, I'm a doctor. You'd be like, oh, well, I got this thing on my arm. Can you take a look at it? I didn't even tell you what kind of doctor I am. I could say that I'm a podiatrist and you want me to look at your arm. That wouldn't make much sense, right? So I typically don't tell people what I do. And if they ask, I say that I do, I'm in human resources. I'm pretty vague about it. Some people have challenged me on that and said you're being humble. Other people have said you're being, disingenuous or lying to people. But I'm not. I'm really not. I'm owning who I am. I know that. And I'll tell you another reason why I do this is because I have a tendency to jump in and want to help people. That's always been my crutch. It's my thing. And I work on every day and I work on with my coach. I don't bring in cats off the street type of thing. But, if I see somebody who's standing in the way of their own greatness, I literally have to bite my tongue. When people say things, I look at someone who has all this possibility or they're working on something. Let's just say it's someone who, you just run into somebody. Hey, what are you doing? I just ran a mile. That's amazing. What are you training for? Marathon. Yeah, but I'm tired. I could have done better. And da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And it's like, you're training for a marathon. You just ran a mile. And in California, nobody runs anywhere. Everyone's driving. It's like people just take themselves out every day. Yeah. So I would rather sit back and not tell somebody what I do and listen to who they are. To me, that's a beautiful thing, to see how people show up. Because as soon as you tell somebody who they are, what they do, it changes their listening. It changes how they're going to act.
So if somebody says, like they know what you do, they know you're a coach, and they say to you, okay, so how can you help me or how can you help us? What do you say?
I always say, well, what do you need help with? What has you asking me that question? I turn it right back because as a coach, our job is to reflect back in conversation through powerful questioning, reflect, frame, so that they start to look for the answers that we believe that they have. They just don't know where to look. But if a time comes where they say, and this happens, what do you think is in my way? Okay, you open the door.
Sure.
I'll take the bait.
One of my, as you, I know you do lots of interviews, but as you do more and more and more, inevitably somebody will ask you a question that will go something like this.
Sure.
If you could go back and give your 20-year-old self advice, what would it be? I'm not going to ask you that question. What I'm going to ask you is this.
Okay.
If your 70-year-old self could come back in time
Yeah.
and talk to you and give you guidance, what would your 70-year-old self say to Josh? How would your 70-year-old self coach Josh?
Don't be so hard on yourself.
Right.
I mean, I could have answered that question before you even finished it.
Yeah.
I'm my worst critic. I'm my hardest critic. I care so much about what I do that and there's ways I can't even articulate it to people.
Yeah.
I mean, I almost tear up right now talking about it because it drives up so much emotion for me. Part of why I went into coaching is because it was resonating with me. It's who I am. It's what I'm meant to do, and it's a big part of what I feel is just my mission. It's just to help people. I have an innate gift or ability to work with people and help them get out of their way so that they can be the best version of themselves. And at times, I sacrifice other things in service of that. Yeah. Meaning I come second, or my family comes second or third, and I'll own it. I'm guilty of it, and I work at it every day. And I have very strict boundaries and guidelines of when I work and when I'm available and when I'm off the clock, and so that I can manage all the multiple projects and things that I'm doing in life. But yeah, without a doubt, it would be don't be so hard on yourself, and probably take a break. You know, as I know, you work hard as well, hard and smart, right?
Yeah.
And because we care, we love what we do.
Well, I think that what you said is what for me is, it's the reason you and I are friends.
Yeah.
Because I've met great coaches, as in they do a great job and they're hugely successful, way more successful than I am. And I'm saddened that they don't give a shit as much. Yeah. And there's part of me that wishes I didn't give a shit as much too, but I do. Like you, you say that and you say you get cheered up. My wife has said, why are you so upset? And I'm not angry, like I'm sad. And it's like, because I can't get this person to go over that line, and I wish I could, and it's not my job, but I wish I could wave the magic wand. And she goes, well, isn't that control? Yes, it is, and I want that control because I care. So, and I think that this is what people miss with coaching. A lot of the time, they want the academic, they want the certification, they want all those things, and nothing wrong with those. No. But if that doesn't include deep level of heart, to care about, and that's what I love about what you bring to the people that you work with. That's what I love about the work that you do. That's really important stuff.
I thank you for that. I mean, listen, I was probably guilty when I first started coaching. Back in the late 90s, right in the 2000, around. Okay, how do I get clients, right? How do I do this? Follow the method, follow the model. Like I think that's normal, when you first start something.
Of course it is.
But at some point you have to develop your own self. You have to evolve, innovate, explore. And I say this as coaches, but I say this to everybody that works in a profession or does one line of service. It's very easy to just clock in, clock out, right? And not care. Yeah. When I've watched other coaches role play live in front of other people or studied them, there's a fine line between the good and the great, and then the great and the brilliant, right? The ones that and those are the ones that I emulate. Those are the ones that I look to. And the things that I can point to is they don't follow a specific model or framework or philosophy. They have a certain set of guiding principles as a coach, certified coach, you follow, and you don't deviate from that. But the rest of it, I feel, is pull from whatever you can that's going to get that person from good to great. Absolutely. That's been my philosophy. I pull from my creative background. I pull from movies, from TED Talks, from books. I'll pull from science. I will pull everything from anywhere except out of my ass, because that's one place where it's not, you got to get to the real stuff. Yeah. And I think everyone's different. And when you stick to one model or one way of thinking, it's going to work with some people. Right. It's not going to work with everybody.
Yeah. You've got to be willing to use whatever you've got in your toolbox. And if your toolbox has only got a hammer, then everything looks like a nail.
Good luck.
And you need
Yeah.
every tool you possibly can. Josh, this hour has flown by. It's been amazing. It's been wonderful.
Sure.
I would love for you to tell our viewers and our listeners where they can find out about you, the resources you offer, your TED Talk, the book.
Sure.
Please let them know all those things if you would, please.
Yeah, so if you go onto my website, which is Josh, Josh, middle initial H, Miller, joshhmiller.com, everything that you want to find there from my TED Talk. My book comes out on March 26th. It'll be online, Amazon, and some other places. But my website is the hub for connecting with me through social media to learn more about my speaking and my TED Talk. And I can't thank you enough for having me, Dov. It's always a pleasure.
Thanks, mate. It's been a real pleasure, a real honor to have you on. And I just can't thank you enough. I really appreciate having somebody of your esteem and somebody of your integrity to share with our viewers and our listeners and to push to that next level of courage for what it really takes to be a leader. So thank you, sir.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
And again, viewers, listeners, Josh H. Miller. Go to joshhmiller.com. There you can find out about his books, you can find out about his TED Talk, you can find out about his coaching, and all of the great resources that Josh offers. And as I said, this is somebody I would highly recommend because I trust him. He's on my advisory board, and if Dov is going to listen to him, you might want to do that too. And remember, the research consistently shows that one of the biggest challenges facing even the most successful companies can be somewhat counterintuitive, and these fast-growing companies often hit a point where they realize that they're spending a fortune attracting, training, and developing talent, only to have that talent leave them with an alarming rate. If you're sick of investing in your talent, only have them leave you before you get your ROI, then come talk to us at fullmontyleadership.com, where we provide you with the essential leadership skills to rekindle and amplify the hidden loyalty assets inside of your organization by tapping into your purpose. fullmontyleadership.com, providing you with the concrete soft skills to get you and your organization to the top and keep you there. Why? Because you can't outsource authenticity. Remember to stop by matrix.fullmontyleadership.com and get your Authentic Leadership Matrix self-assessment tool. It allows you to assess yourself in the 5 areas of leadership. It's absolutely free to my viewers and listeners, valued at $197. Get yourself over there. You don't need the www. Just matrix.fullmontyleadership.com. I'm your host, Dov Barron, founder of Full Monty Leadership, and I'm here to assist you tapping into your deep greatness so that you can reach that next level of clarity, focus, purpose, profit in your business, your life, and your leadership. Stay curious, my friend. Stay curious about how your assumptions could be the very thing that's keeping you from the greatness that you came here to deliver. Till next time, this is Dov Barron, and I am out.